Sam Whitaker knocked back the whiskey, slammed the empty glass onto the bar, and jabbed a shaking finger toward the woman sitting alone across the room. "Please tell me you're my blind date," he called out, forcing a grin over the crack in his voice. "Because tonight is already a complete disaster." The woman set down her wine, folded her hands, and smiled the way a wolf smiles right before it decides what to do with you. "I'm not your blind date, Mr. Whitaker," she said quietly. "I'm your CEO." His stomach dropped straight through the floor. Whatever she said next would either end his career or change his life forever. Before we begin, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from so I can see how far Sam's story travels tonight. And if you believe people deserve a second chance, hit subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. Sam Whitaker had not planned to be in a bar that night. 3 weeks ago, he would have told anyone that sitting on a bar stool at 9 o'clock on a Thursday was for younger men. Single men. Men who didn't have a 7-year-old daughter, waiting at home for someone to read her a story about a dragon who couldn't breathe fire. But 3 weeks ago, Rachel had still been living in the apartment. And 3 weeks ago, Sam had still believed foolishly that a marriage could be patched the way you patch a tire. A little pressure, a little sealant, and you're back on the road. Rachel had packed 2 suitcases and taken the good coffee maker. "You're not here, Sam," she had said, standing in the doorway with her car keys already in her fist. "Even when you're home, you're not here. You're at that office in your head. You come through the door and Lily runs to you and you smile at her, but your eyes are still on your phone. I can't compete with a company that doesn't even know your name." "They know my name," he'd said stupidly. And that was the last real conversation of his marriage, an argument he'd lost by defending the wrong thing. She hadn't left him for another man. Somehow that made it worse. She'd left him for the simple, quiet freedom of not waiting for someone who never fully arrived. So now it was Sam and Lily, just the 2 of them, in an apartment that suddenly felt too big and too quiet, where the second coffee mug sat unused in the cabinet, and the babysitter Mrs. Delgado from down the hall watched too much television. His sister Ellie had shown up on his doorstep that Thursday afternoon with a bag of groceries she hadn't been asked to buy, and a look on her face he knew too well. "You're going out tonight," Ellie announced, setting the bag on the counter. "I'm not going out." "You're going out. Lily's staying at my place. I already talked to her. She's excited. She wants to bake cookies and watch that show with the singing puppets." "Ellie." "Don't Ellie me. It's been 3 weeks. You've lost 8 pounds. You look like a ghost that files taxes." She started unpacking oranges she'd apparently decided he needed. "I set you up. A friend of a friend. Her name's Diane. She's a nurse. She's kind. She laughs at bad jokes, which good news for you. That's the only kind you have. You're meeting her at Halloran's at 8:30. "I don't want to meet a nurse named Diane." "Nobody wants to meet a nurse named Diane," Ellie said. "And then they meet her and their whole life turns around. You're going, Sam. For me? For Lily. Because if you keep going the way you're going, that little girl is going to grow up watching her father disappear 1 inch at a time, and I won't stand there and let it happen." That last part got him. It always did with Ellie. She knew where the soft spots were, because she'd known him longest. She'd been 14 when their father walked out, and she'd watched their own mother turn into somebody who mostly stared out windows. Ellie had spent 30 years making sure nobody in her family ever became a window starer again. "Fine," Sam said. "1 drink. If she's terrible, I'm leaving." "If she's terrible, text me and I'll invent an emergency." He got there at 8:40. 10 minutes late because he'd sat in the parking lot of Halloran's for those 10 minutes gripping the steering wheel and rehearsing sentences a normal person could say to a stranger. He couldn't remember how to do this. He'd married Rachel at 26. He was 40 now. The last time he'd been on a first date, people still burned CDs. The bar was crowded, warm, loud, in the pleasant way of a place where people had decided to enjoy themselves. Sam stood just inside the door and pulled up the text from Ellie. "She's got dark hair. She'll be at a small table near the back. She said she'd be wearing a green scarf. Dark hair. Small table near the back." He scanned the room, and there near the back, alone at a small table, a woman with dark hair. He couldn't see a green scarf, but the lighting was bad, and he was terrible at colors. Rachel used to buy all his clothes. Close enough. His heart was going like a trapped bird. He'd had one whiskey at the bar to steady himself while he searched, and he'd knocked it back too fast, and now he was warm and reckless and terrified all at once. Just say something, anything. Break the ice, anything. He walked over. His whole body felt like it belonged to someone else. The woman was looking down at her phone, and she was even Sam terrified, noticed extraordinarily composed, elegant in a way that didn't fit a Thursday. But he was too far gone to slow down now, so Sam Whitaker did the thing he would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. He put on his best crooked grin, pointed a shaking finger at her, and said too loud, "Please tell me you're my blind date because tonight is already a complete disaster." The woman looked up, and Sam's entire body went cold. He knew that face. Everyone at Apex Global Marketing knew that face. It was on the wall in the lobby in a black and white photograph the size of a car door. It was on the screen at every all-hands meeting beamed in from a corner office on the 31st floor that Sam had never once been invited to. It was the face of the woman who signed somewhere far above him, and 11 layers of management, the checks that paid his rent. Catherine Vance, the chief executive officer of Apex Global Marketing. His boss's 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 boss. Sam's grin froze on his face like something that had died there. He started. Catherine Vance set down her phone. She did not look angry. That was the terrifying part. She looked, if anything, mildly amused, the way a person is amused by a small animal doing something unexpected on the sidewalk. She folded her hands on the table, tilted her head, and studied him with a pair of gray eyes that Sam felt in his spine. "You're not my blind date," she said quietly. "No?" Sam managed. "No, I can see that now. I'm so sorry. I got the table wrong. I got the whole everything wrong. I'm at the wrong table. I'm at the wrong—" He was babbling. He couldn't stop. "I work for you. I work at Apex. I'm nobody. I'm in marketing. I'm not. I don't usually. I'm going to go now. Sit down." Sam stopped. It wasn't loud. She didn't raise her voice at all. But there was something in those two words, some quality of absolute authority worn so casually it didn't need volume, that stopped Sam Whitaker in his tracks, the way a red light stops a driver on instinct. "Ma'am?" "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker. Sam Whitaker." "Sit down, Sam Whitaker. You're making the whole bar nervous, hovering there like you're about to be executed." Slowly, feeling like a man lowering himself into a bathtub full of ice, Sam pulled out the chair across from her and sat. "I really am sorry," he said. "I'm supposed to be meeting someone, a nurse, named Diane. My sister set it up. I saw dark hair and a table near the back, and I panicked, honestly. I haven't done this in 14 years, and I just kind of ran at the first table that matched like an idiot. And you're my CEO. You're literally my CEO. This is the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and I once got food poisoning at my own wedding rehearsal." Catherine Vance did something then that Sam did not expect. She laughed. Not a polite little corporate laugh, a real one, short, surprised out of her before she could catch it, a laugh that seemed to startle her as much as it startled him. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips as if to hold the rest of it in. "Food poisoning at your own rehearsal," she repeated. "The shrimp. I told them not to do the shrimp." "And you married her anyway." "I did," Sam said, and the smile that had been climbing onto his face slid right back off. For a while. Something shifted in the woman's gray eyes. She caught it. Sam could see her catch at the little door that had opened, and the way she noticed it opening. She reached for her wine and took a slow sip, and when she set the glass down, her voice was different. Lighter, but underneath it careful. "Your blind date," she said. "The nurse, Diane. Where is she?" Sam glanced around the bar. He looked back at his phone. There was a new text from Ellie he hadn't seen. "Sam. She texted me. She's stuck at the hospital double shift. She can't make it. She's so sorry. Come home. I'll make you a sandwich." Sam let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "She's not coming," he said. "She got called into work. She's a nurse. There's an actual reason." He turned the phone around so Catherine could see it. See, I didn't make her up to explain why I ran at a stranger. There really was a Diane. I believe you, Catherine said. No one invents a nurse named Diane. It's too boring to be a lie. That's what I said. You said that to my sister when she set it up. Sam scrubbed a hand down his face. Look, Ms. Vance, I should go. I've bothered you enough. I'm going to go home and hide under my bed for the rest of my natural life. And on Monday, I'm going to hand in my resignation before you can fire me. And honestly, the whole thing's probably a relief, because now I'll finally have time to... You're not going to resign, Catherine said. I'm not. No, because I'm not going to fire you. She turned her wine glass slowly by the stem, a quarter turn, then another. You mistook me for a nurse named Diane. That's not a firing offense. That might be the nicest thing anyone's said to me in a year. A pause. The nurse part, I mean, not the disaster part. To be fair, I meant my night was a disaster, not I wasn't calling you a disaster. I understood. I want that on the record. So noted. They sat there. And here is the strange thing. The thing Sam couldn't have explained to Ellie, or to anyone, the thing that would matter enormously in the days and weeks to come. He didn't leave. He'd been handed a perfect exit, a text, an excuse, an apology delivered and accepted. And every rational part of him was screaming to take it to flee back to his car and his apartment and his ordinary invisible life. But he didn't move. Because there was something in the way Catherine Vance had said the nicest thing anyone said to me in a year. Something in the flatness of it. The way a person delivers a fact they've stopped feeling because feeling it hurt too much. Sam knew that flatness. He'd heard it in his own voice for 3 weeks. He'd heard it saying, "They know my name," to a wife who was already walking out the door. "Can I ask you something?" Sam said. "And you can fire me for this one. This is a much better firing offense." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Go on. Why are you sitting alone in a bar on a Thursday night? You're Catherine Vance. You could be anywhere. You could have people. You could have an entourage or a private club or whatever it is, people like you have. And you're here by yourself at a little table near the back, waiting for nobody." The eyebrow came down. For a long moment she didn't answer, and Sam was sure he'd stepped over a line he couldn't step back from. He opened his mouth to apologize again. Apologizing was becoming his whole personality tonight. But she spoke first. "I come here because nobody knows me here," she said. "Or nobody's supposed to." A dry glance at him. "You've somewhat ruined that." "I'm very good at ruining things. It's my one real talent." "I doubt that." She said it simply without flattery as an observation. Then, "My father used to bring me to this bar when I was young. Long before it was this, before they redid it, before the exposed brick and the $40 cocktails. It was a dump then, a real one. He'd order a beer and a ginger ale, and we'd split a plate of terrible nachos, and he'd tell me about his day at the plant." She turned the glass again. "He passed 4 months ago. I keep coming back here. I don't fully know why. I sit at his table, and I order a wine he would have thought was ridiculous, and I feel closer, I suppose, which is stupid. He's not here. He's nowhere. But the room remembers him." Sam went very still. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it in a way he hadn't meant a single one of his earlier apologies. "That's not stupid. My mom used to sit in my dad's chair after he left. Not he didn't die, he just left. But she'd sit in his chair for years after, and my sister and I thought she was being weird. And it wasn't until I was grown that I understood she was just trying to sit somewhere he'd been. Because a chair where somebody used to be is better than nothing at all." Catherine looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. Not the amused assessment of a small animal on the sidewalk, but something steadier. Something that took him in as a person. "Your father left," she said. "When I was 12, Ellie was 14. He said he was going out for... I'm not even going to say it. It's such a cliché. He went out for something and didn't come back. We got a postcard once, from Arizona. It said, 'Doing well. Hope you kids are good.' That was it. That was my whole relationship with the second half of my father's life. 14 words on the back of a picture of a cactus. 14 words? Catherine repeated. I counted them a lot as a kid. I don't know why. I'd get it out of the drawer and count them like maybe I'd miscounted, and there was a 15th word hiding somewhere that would explain everything. He shrugged, and the shrug cost him something. There wasn't. It was just 14 words. And then I grew up and swore I'd never be that guy, the guy who disappears on his family. He gave a short, ugly laugh. And then my wife left me 3 weeks ago because I'd become exactly that guy, just without the postcard. I disappeared and stayed in the same apartment, which is somehow worse. He hadn't meant to say all of that. He'd meant to make a joke about the nachos and go home. But there was something about talking to a stranger who was also impossibly the most important person in his professional universe, someone with whom he had absolutely no future, no reason to perform, no small talk to protect, that pulled the truth up out of him like a splinter. Catherine didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't reach across the table and touch his hand. She just nodded slowly, and Sam understood that she was a woman who had learned to distrust easy comfort. "How did you become that guy?" she asked instead. "The usual way, one late night at a time. It never feels like a decision. It feels like being responsible. I told myself I was doing it for them, for Rachel, for Lily, my daughter. She's 7. I told myself I was breaking my back at Apex so Lily could have things I never had. And Rachel kept saying, she doesn't want things, she wants you. And I'd nod and agree, and go answer another email." He stared at the table. "I have a daughter who ran to the door every night, Ms. Vance. Every single night for years she'd run to the door when she heard my key. And somewhere in there I started resenting it. Because I was tired, and she wanted me, and I had nothing left to give. Do you know what kind of a man resents his own kid for loving him?" "A tired one," Catherine said. "Not a bad one." "That's generous." "I'm not a generous person," she said. "Ask anyone at Apex. Ask the analysts. I'm called a lot of things, and generous has never been one of them." She took a sip of wine. "But you're not a bad man, Sam Whitaker. Bad men don't count the words on postcards for 30 years. Bad men don't sit in a bar telling a stranger they resent their own child and hate themselves for it. Bad men are very comfortable. That's what makes them bad. You are the opposite of comfortable." Sam looked at her. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" "Honestly, a shark. That's what everybody at the office says. That you're, cold. That you fired an entire division by video call once and didn't blink. That you don't have that you're all business." Something crossed her face. Not hurt exactly. Recognition, more like. The face of a person hearing an accurate description of a costume they'd been wearing so long, they'd forgotten it came off. "I did fire a division by video call," she said. "It was 200 people. It was the worst day of my professional life, and I did it in 9 minutes because if I'd let it take 10, I would have started crying. And a woman in my position does not get to cry, Sam. Do you understand that? A man in my chair fires 200 people, and he's decisive. A woman does it, and she's a shark. So I became the shark. It was easier than being seen. Sharks don't get hurt. Sharks don't get overlooked at their own dinner tables." She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "That was more than I intended to say. It's the bar," Sam said gently. "This bar makes people say things. Your dad probably knew that. Maybe that's why he brought you here." Catherine Vance looked at him across the little table near the back, and for just a second, 1 second, the shark was gone entirely. And there was only a tired woman who missed her father sitting in his chair, drinking a wine he'd have laughed at. "Maybe it is," she said softly. For a while, neither of them spoke. The bar carried on around them, loud and warm and indifferent. 100 conversations Sam couldn't hear, and none of it touched the strange, still bubble of the table where they sat. He should go home. He knew he should go home. Ellie was making a sandwich. Lily was probably asleep by now, curled up in Ellie's guest bed with the stuffed dragon she wouldn't sleep without. He had a whole life waiting for him 3 miles away. And yet, "Can I buy you another wine?" Sam heard himself ask. Catherine looked at the glass in her hand, nearly empty. Then she looked at him, and there was a war in her face. Sam could see it plainly, the pull between the two women. She was the CEO who knew exactly how catastrophically stupid it would be to keep drinking with a subordinate in a bar and the daughter who had come here to not be alone. "You know this is a terrible idea," she said. "The worst," Sam agreed. "I've made 3 terrible decisions tonight already. What's a 4th? I'm your CEO. I know, believe me. It's been the loudest thought in my head for 20 minutes. But you're also the only person I've talked to in 3 weeks who didn't look at me like I'm made of broken glass. And I don't know I know exactly who you are, but I don't know you, and you don't know anyone I know, and tomorrow we can both pretend this never happened. Tonight I'm just some idiot who ran at the wrong table, and you're just a woman who lost her dad. Nobody at Apex ever has to know I made you laugh about shrimp." Catherine Vance held his gaze for a long, long moment. Then she pushed her glass an inch toward him. "A red," she said. "Whatever the man behind the bar recommends. My father always said only fools order wine by the name. Order by the person pouring it." Sam stood up, and his legs were unsteady, but not from the whiskey anymore. He went to the bar and ordered 2 glasses of whatever the bartender loved that week, and while he waited, he pulled out his phone with a hand that wasn't quite steady and typed to Ellie. "I'm okay." Something came up. "Not Diane. Long story. Tell Lily I love her, and I'll pick her up in the morning. Thank you for tonight. You were right, I needed to get out." He didn't say the rest of it. He couldn't have explained the rest of it. He didn't understand it himself. He carried the 2 glasses back to the table near the back, Catherine's father's table, and set one down in front of the most powerful woman he had ever met. A woman who could end his career with a phone call, and who had instead just told him about the nachos she used to split with her dad. She wrapped her fingers around the stem. "To your father's chair," Sam said, lifting his glass. "And to the worst joke ever told in this bar." The corner of Catherine's mouth lifted. "To the worst joke," she agreed. "And to nurses named Diane, wherever they are tonight." Their glasses touched with a small, clear sound. And Sam Whitaker, single father 40 years old, 3 weeks out of a marriage, sitting across from the CEO of Apex Global Marketing at a table that belonged to a dead man's memory, had no way of knowing, none at all, that the wrong joke he'd told a stranger that Thursday night had just quietly, permanently changed the entire course of both their lives. He only knew that for the first time in 3 weeks, he didn't want to leave a room. And across the little table, watching him over the rim of a wineglass, her father would have mocked. Catherine Vance realized with something that felt dangerously like relief and dangerously like fear that neither did she. She set the glass down. "Tell me about your daughter," she said. "The one who runs to the door. Tell me about Lily." And so, in a warm, loud bar where nobody knew either of them, 2 of the loneliest people in the city leaned toward each other over a table meant for a ghost, and began without meaning to, without wanting to, without the slightest idea of what it would cost them both to talk. "Lily," Sam said, and the name softened his whole face. "Lily's 7 going on 40. She corrects my grammar. She has opinions about everything, the weather, the news, whether ketchup belongs on eggs. She's decided it does, by the way, and I've stopped fighting her on it." "Does it?" "Absolutely not. But you don't win that argument. You just learn to live in the world she's built." He turned the wine glass in his hand the way he'd watched Catherine do. "She's got this stuffed dragon. Green thing named Pickle. Don't ask me why I've never gotten a straight answer. And there's a book, a picture book about a dragon who can't breathe fire. Every other dragon in the story can do it, and this one just puffs out little clouds of smoke, and he's ashamed, and by the end he figures out the smoke is actually the thing that saves the village. I've read that book maybe 400 times. You have it memorized. I could recite it in my sleep. I have recited it in my sleep, according to Rachel." The name landed and sat there a moment. "According to my ex-wife." Catherine didn't flinch away from the correction the way most people would have. "When did you last read it to her, Lily?" Sam went quiet. "That's the thing," he said finally. "I don't know. And that's the whole problem in one question. There was a night the last night I think that I did the whole routine bath and book and the song she makes me sing, and I didn't know it was the last one. Nobody tells you it's the last time you'll carry your kid to bed. You just do it one night, and then work gets loud, and Rachel starts doing bedtime because I'm never home for it. And by the time you look up, your daughter's stopped asking you to read the dragon book because she's learned you'll say, 'Not tonight, sweetheart. Daddy's got a deadline.'" He set the glass down. "She stopped asking. That's the part that guts me. She didn't cry about it. She just filed me under busy and moved on. 7 years old, and she'd already adjusted her expectations of her own father down to almost nothing." "That's the loudest kind of grief," Catherine said. "The kind that stops asking." "Yeah." Sam looked at her. "You know something about that. I know everything about that." She rotated her glass a slow quarter turn. "My mother stopped asking my father to come home for dinner about 10 years before he actually stopped coming home for dinner. She just set his plate and cleared it, and set it and cleared it, until one day she stopped setting it, and nobody said a word. That's how a marriage dies in my family. Not with a fight. With a plate that stops getting set." "Is that what happened to yours?" The question was too direct, and they both knew it. Sam saw her way whether to answer. Saw the shark surface for a second, the reflex to deflect to make a joke to remind him of the 11 layers of hierarchy between them. And then he watched her decide not to. "I was married," Catherine said. 9 years. His name was Daniel Cross. She said the name with the particular care of a person handling something that had cut them before. "He was charming. Everyone loved Daniel. Daniel was the kind of man who remembers your assistant's birthday and asks about your mother's hip surgery, and everyone in the room thinks what a wonderful man, how lucky she is. And I was lucky for a while. And then I got promoted, and then I got promoted again, and somewhere around the time my name went on the door, Daniel stopped being able to look at me. Because you were successful. Because I was more successful than him. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference. He didn't mind me being good. He minded me being better. He'd smile at dinner parties and squeeze my hand, and then we'd get in the car, and he wouldn't speak to me the whole way home. 9 years of that hand squeeze in public and silence in the car. And I kept thinking, if I just win one more thing, close one more deal, prove myself one more time, he'll be proud of me instead of threatened." That's the trap. You think success is the thing that will finally make you enough. And the more you get, the more alone you are, because the person you're trying to impress is rooting against you. What happened? He left, eventually. But not before he'd made sure I understood it was my fault. That my ambition had killed us. That a real woman would have known when to stop. Her jaw tightened. I was 38 years old, running one of the largest agencies in the country, and I lay awake at night wondering if I was a real woman. Do you know how much that costs? The hours I spent on that I could have run the company twice over with the energy I put into wondering whether wanting my own life had made me unlovable. It didn't, Sam said. You don't know that. I know you've been sitting in this bar for 20 minutes making an unemployed marketing guy feel like the most interesting person in the room, and that's not what an unlovable person does. That's what somebody does who's got a lot of love in them and nowhere to put it. Catherine looked at him sharply, and Sam braced for her to shut it down, to remind him that he was speaking wildly out of turn to the head of his company. Instead, she looked away first, which he hadn't expected, and when she looked back, her eyes were bright in a way she clearly hated. "You're not unemployed," she said. "You still work for me, as of tonight. For now, until you remember on Monday that I called you a disaster and pointed at you like a lunatic. I told you, that's not a firing offense." A breath. "Do you want to know what a firing offense is, Sam, sitting here? Right now. This two of us. This table, these glasses. If anyone from the 31st floor walked into this bar in the next 10 seconds, I would be the one with the problem. Not you. Me. There are rules about this. Rules I helped write. A CEO does not drink alone in a bar with a man 11 levels below her on the org chart and talk about her dead father and her ex-husband. There are memos. There are trainings. I have signed my name to the policy that says this specific thing must not happen. So why are you still sitting here? I don't know. She said it plainly, almost angrily, as if the not knowing offended her. I always know. That's my whole job. I walk into a room and I know within 90 seconds what everyone in it wants and how much it'll cost me to give it to them or take it from them. I've built an entire career on knowing, and I do not know why I am still sitting at this table with you. It's extremely irritating. Sam laughed. He couldn't help it. I'm sorry. Don't apologize again. If you apologize one more time tonight, I'm going to have security remove you, and then it'll be a firing offense. You have security here. I have security everywhere. That's another thing nobody tells you about my chair. There's a man named Owen sitting 4 tables away pretending to read a newspaper. There are no newspapers anymore, Sam. Nobody reads a physical newspaper in a bar in this decade. He might as well be holding a sign. Sam turned casually. And, yes, 4 tables away, a large, calm man in a jacket that fit too well over his shoulders, turning the page of an actual newspaper with the total disinterest of a man being paid to sit there. Huh, Sam said. He's good, though. I'd have never noticed. That's the job. Catherine took a sip. The point is this: you and me at this table is being witnessed by at least one person whose entire function is to keep me safe and out of trouble. And Owen has excellent judgment, and Owen has not walked over here to end this conversation. Which means even Owen can tell that whatever this is, it isn't the thing the policy was written to prevent. What is it then? I told you, I don't know. 2 people who needed to talk to a stranger, maybe. There's a mercy in strangers. You can hand them the true version of yourself because they'll never use it against you. They'll take the train home and forget your face. I'm not going to forget your face, Sam said. You're on the wall in the lobby. I see your face every morning when I badge in. That stopped her. He watched it stop her. That's the problem, isn't it? She said quietly. You will see me on the wall, and I'll see you at some point in the elevator, or a meeting, or a name on a list, and we'll both have to pretend this table never existed. Probably. That's the responsible thing. That's what we should agree to right now over this ridiculous wine my father would have mocked. That we finish these glasses like 2 civilized adults, and then we walk out separately. And Monday morning, I'm Catherine Vance on the wall, and you're Sam Whitaker in marketing. And this was a small, strange kindness that neither of us mentions ever again. That's the responsible thing, Sam agreed. Yes, we should do that. We should. Neither of them moved. The glasses stayed full. Owen turned another page of his newspaper. Tell me the rest about Lily, Catherine said. You never told me what happens after the dragon can't breathe fire. And Sam, who had just agreed with the head of his company that they would never speak again after tonight, leaned in and told her the whole story of the dragon who saved the village with smoke instead of fire, doing the voices, even the villagers, even the mean older dragon who mocks the little one. And Catherine Vance laughed twice more, and the second time she laughed, she put her hand briefly over her mouth again, and Sam noticed she did that every time covered a laugh, like it was something she wasn't supposed to have, something she'd been trained out of, and that small covered laugh did more to undo him than anything she'd said all night. They didn't leave after those glasses. They ordered coffee. I have a company to run in the morning, Catherine said. I can't do this on wine. And they kept talking, and somewhere in the second hour, Sam realized he'd stopped feeling terrified and started feeling something much more dangerous, which was comfortable. She asked him things nobody had asked him in years. Not, how's work, but what did you want to be before all this? And Sam, who hadn't thought about the answer in a decade, told her. I wanted to build things, he said. Actual things. I was going to be a carpenter. My grandfather was a carpenter. My mom's dad, not the one who mailed the cactus. He built the crib I slept in, built the table we ate at. When he died, he left me his tools, this whole chest of them, hand planes and chisels, older than my mother, and I keep them in a closet, and I haven't touched them in God. Years. I make ad campaigns for a living. I move words around a screen to convince people to buy things they don't need, and in a closet, I have the tools of a man who built a crib by hand, And I don't touch them because I'm too tired from moving the words around. Why don't you touch them? Because it would hurt too much to be bad at it. I used to be good. I used to be able to make a dovetail joint you couldn't slide a piece of paper through. And now my hands don't remember, and it would break my heart to sit down at that chest and discover I've forgotten the one thing I ever actually loved doing. He shook his head. Sorry. That's a lot for a Thursday. Stop apologizing. But she said it gently this time. You should touch the tools, Sam. You should stop firing divisions by video call. She went still. That's not the same. It's exactly the same. It's a thing you used to have that you were good at, that you loved, and you don't do it anymore because doing it means feeling something. And you've decided feeling things is a luxury you can't afford. The tools in my closet and whatever you buried when Daniel taught you that being yourself made you unlovable, that's the same closet, Catherine. It's the same closed door. He'd used her first name. He realized it the second it was out. Not Ms. Vance, not ma'am. Catherine. Out loud. To her face. Across a table. The whole air of the moment changed. She noticed it too. Of course she noticed it. She noticed everything. But she didn't correct him. That's a very presumptuous thing to say to your CEO, she said. I know. You've said a lot of presumptuous things tonight. I've had a very presumptuous night. It started with pointing at you and telling you my life was a disaster. The corner of her mouth moved. It's Catherine then, when we're at this table, since you've apparently decided we're the kind of strangers who use first names and diagnose each other's closets. When we're at this table, Sam repeated, and on the wall in the lobby, you're Ms. Vance. On the wall, I'm Ms. Vance. Deal. They shook on it absurdly across the table, her hand cool and small and certain in his. And the handshake lasted exactly 1 beat too long, and they both let go at the same time as if they'd touched a stove. It was nearly midnight when the bartender started stacking chairs. Catherine looked at her watch, a real watch thin and expensive, and made a small sound of disbelief. I have a board prep at 7, she said. I have quite possibly ruined tomorrow. Was it worth it? She looked at him. She took a long time to answer, and Sam understood by now that when Catherine Vance took a long time, it wasn't because she didn't know, it was because she was deciding how much truth she was willing to hand him. Yes, she said finally. It was worth it. And that's a problem, Sam. That's the whole problem. They walked out together, which was itself a small violation of the plan. The responsible version had them leaving separately. But the bar was closing, and there was only one door. And Owen folded his newspaper and rose and followed at a distance, and the three of them stepped out into the cold together. The CEO, the marketing specialist, and the bodyguard, an unlikely trio on an empty sidewalk at midnight. My car's this way, Catherine said, nodding down the block to where a dark sedan sat idling a driver behind the wheel. Of course there was a driver. Of course there was a car. Sam had a 14-year-old Honda in the Halloran's lot with a car seat in the back and a juice box stain that would outlive them all. Mine's back at the bar, Sam said. Different bar. I was supposed to meet Diane at Halloran's. I don't even know how I ended up here. I drove past Halloran's when she canceled and just kept driving, and I saw the sign for this place and thought, I'll have one drink somewhere. Nobody knows me. Somewhere nobody knows you, Catherine echoed. That's why I come here too. We had the same idea. We had the exact same idea, and we walked into the same bar, and I sat down at your table by mistake. By mistake, she said, and the word hung strangely between them because it hadn't felt like a mistake for hours now, and they both knew it, and neither of them was going to say so on a cold sidewalk with a bodyguard pretending not to listen. So this is where we do the responsible thing, Sam said. This is where we do the responsible thing. Good night, Miss Vance. She looked at him. The shark was fully gone now. There was just a woman on a sidewalk who did not want to get in her car. Good night, Sam Whitaker, she said, and she got in the car, and Owen closed the door, and the sedan pulled away from the curb, and Sam Whitaker stood alone on the empty sidewalk and watched the taillights shrink to 2 red points and vanish around the corner. And he thought, that's that. That's the strangest night of my life, and now it's over. And Monday I go back to being invisible. He was wrong about that. He didn't know it yet, but he was completely wrong. He picked Lily up from Ellie's the next morning, and his sister took one look at his face and folded her arms. Diane must have been something, Ellie said. Diane canceled. Then why do you look like that? Like what? Like somebody woke you up. You've looked half dead for 3 weeks and now you look like I don't know. Like somebody plugged you back in. What happened? Nothing happened. I had a drink at a bar and came home. Which was technically true and enormously false, and Ellie's eyes narrowed because Ellie could always tell, but Lily came barreling out of the guest room with Pickle the Dragon under one arm and threw herself at Sam's legs, and the conversation was over. Daddy, we made cookies, and I ate 4, and Aunt Ellie said, don't tell you, but I'm telling you because we don't have secrets. 4 cookies, Sam said, scooping her up. That's a felony in some states. What's a felony? A very serious cookie crime. Come on, kiddo, let's go home. And in the car with Lily narrating the entire plot of a cartoon from the back seat, Sam kept thinking about the tools in the closet. And about a woman who covered her laugh like it was contraband. And about how he'd made a deal to never speak to her again, and how much he already resented the deal. He told himself it would fade. These things faded. You had a strange, intense night with a stranger, and then Monday came, and real life sanded it down until it was just an anecdote you'd never tell anyone. Monday came. He badged in at 8:04. He walked past the wall in the lobby, the enormous black and white photograph of Catherine Vance. Chin-lifted gray eyes, Level the Shark, the version on the wall, and he stopped in front of it for the first time in the 2 years he'd worked there. And he looked at it and he thought, I know you cover your laugh. I know about the nachos. I know you count the plate your mother stopped setting. And then a coworker said, Morning, Sam. And he snapped out of it and went up to the 11th floor and sat down at his desk and tried to be a person who had never sat at that table. It lasted 9 days. On the 9th day, an email arrived in his inbox at 4:47 in the afternoon from an address he didn't recognize, not the corporate format, a personal account. No subject line. He almost deleted it as spam. He opened it instead. I touched the tools, it said. Metaphorically. I taught a strategy session myself this morning, instead of sending a deck down from on high. First time in 3 years. It went badly, and I loved it. K. Sam read it 4 times. His heart was doing the trapped bird thing again. He looked around the open floor as if someone might be watching him read it, which was absurd. Nobody knew, nobody could know. He typed back before he could talk himself out of it. Metaphorical tools count. Did anyone recognize you without the shark suit? The reply came fast, which meant she'd been waiting. A junior analyst told me I was surprisingly normal. I've decided to take it as the highest compliment of my career. Did you touch yours? Not yet. Coward. But I opened the closet door and looked at the chest. That's step 1, right? That's step 1. Open the door. K. And that was it. That should have been it. A nice exchange, a little follow-up, a warm ember from a strange night, and then silence and back to real life. But the next day, there was another email, and the day after that. Nothing improper. She was too smart for. Improper. And so was he. Just 2 people who had found unexpectedly the one person each of them could tell the truth to. She told him about the board members who talked over her. He told her about Lily's parent-teacher conference, where the teacher had said Lily wrote an essay about her family, and drew her father with a phone for a head. I drew Daddy, but I made his head a phone, because that's what he looks at, the teacher had reported gently. Sam had sat in the tiny chair in the classroom and nearly come apart. A phone for a head. Catherine wrote back. Sam, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. Yes, you do. I put in for a schedule change, reduced hours, home by 6 every night. My manager looked at me like I'd asked to be paid in seashells. Did he approve it? He said he'd have to see, which means no. There was a pause, a long one longer than her usual replies, and then, consider it approved. Sam stared at the screen. You can't do that. You're not supposed to know I exist. If you approve my schedule change, somebody's going to ask why the CEO is personally intervening for a marketing specialist 11 levels down. You're right. I won't do it directly. But schedule flexibility for parents of young children is about to become a company-wide policy initiative that I've apparently cared about for a long time. You won't be singled out. You'll just be one of 400 people who benefit from a very sensible HR reform that a certain CEO championed for reasons no one will ever connect to a bar. And 2 weeks later, that was exactly what happened. A company-wide announcement. Flexible hours for working parents. Sam read the all-staff email at his desk with his heart in his throat, because he knew he was the only person in the entire building who knew that a policy affecting 400 families had been quietly born at a little table near the back of a bar out of a story about a 7-year-old who drew her father with a phone for a head. He wrote to her that night after Lily was asleep. Asleep after he'd read her the Dragon Book, all the way through, doing all the voices home by 6 for the 3rd night in a row, and Lily had looked at him halfway through and said, "Daddy, you're home a lot now," in a voice that broke his heart and mended it in the same breath. You changed 400 families' lives because of a bar joke, he wrote. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it, she wrote back. Just read her the Dragon Book. That's the whole return on my investment. A 7-year-old getting her father back. That's a better outcome than any deal I've closed this year, and I closed a very good deal this year. Thank you, Catherine. It's Ms. Vance, she wrote, when we're not at the table. We haven't been at the table in 3 weeks. There was a long pause. I know, she wrote. I've noticed. Meet me at the table Thursday. Same time. My father's table. I've decided I need to keep touching the tools, and it turns out you're the only person who understands what that sentence means. Sam read it standing in his kitchen in the quiet apartment with his daughter asleep down the hall, and his grandfather's tool chest still sitting closed in the closet, one door opened, but not yet fully crossed. Every rational part of him knew what this was becoming. Knew the cliff they were both walking toward with their eyes open. Knew that a CEO and a marketing specialist meeting privately at a bar was in the cold language of the policy he'd read during onboarding an unacceptable conflict, a fireable offense, a scandal waiting for a match. He knew all of it. He typed back one word, Thursday, and in her apartment across the city, a place Sam had never seen, could not picture a place with too many rooms and not enough noise. Catherine Vance read that one word and covered her mouth, though there was no one there to hide the laugh from no one there at all, which was rather the whole point of everything, and she set the phone down on the counter and stood for a long moment in the silence. She'd built her whole successful life inside of, and understood that she was about to do something reckless and human and possibly ruinous, and that for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was not going to talk herself out of it. She was going to sit at her father's table on Thursday, and she was going to let herself be seen. She just didn't know yet, neither of them knew, that they weren't the only ones watching the table. Somewhere in the city, a man who remembered a hand squeezed in public, and silence in the car, a man named Daniel Cross who had told his wife that her ambition had killed them and had never once forgiven her for surviving it, had heard through the strange grapevine of the powerful that Catherine Vance had been seen twice now at a certain bar laughing of all things with a man nobody could identify. And Daniel Cross, who could not stand to be beaten, who had spent years telling himself he'd left her rather than admit she'd outgrown him, poured himself a drink and began very quietly to ask around. Thursday came, and Sam sat at the table before she did. He'd gotten there early on purpose, partly to steady his nerves, and partly because he'd wanted to see the room the way she must see it. The little table near the back. The ghost of a man who'd split terrible nachos with his daughter here decades ago. He ordered a ginger ale. He didn't know why. Something about the story of her father had lodged in him, and when the bartender asked what he wanted, ginger ale had come out before he'd decided to say it. Catherine arrived at 8:15, and Owen drifted in behind her and took his post 4 tables away with a fresh newspaper, and she slid into the chair across from Sam and looked at the glass in front of him. "Ginger ale," she said. "Your dad ordered a beer and a ginger ale," Sam said. "You told me." I thought I don't know what I thought. It seemed rude to sit at his table and not honor the ginger ale. Something moved across her face, quick and unguarded, and she looked down at the table for a second, before she trusted herself to speak. "He would have liked you," she said. "That's a dangerous thing for me to say to an employee, so I'll only say it once. My father would have liked you. He liked people who noticed things. I notice things now. I didn't used to. I think I turned it off for a while. It's easier to be tired if you don't notice anything. It's easier to run a company if you don't notice anything too," Catherine said. "I've spent 15 years perfecting the art of not noticing. Not noticing the analyst who's drowning. Not noticing the vice president who's stealing credit. Not noticing that I go home to an apartment where the only sound is the ice maker." She picked up the menu and set it down without looking at it. "And then, a man points at me in a bar and calls his life a disaster, and I can't stop noticing things. It's very inconvenient. I noticed today that my chief financial officer bites his thumbnail when he's lying to me. 15 years I've worked with that man, and I never saw it until this month. You've broken something in me, Sam Whitaker, and I can't decide if I'm grateful or furious. Can you be both? I'm the CEO. I can be anything I schedule time for." He laughed, and she covered her mouth, and Sam pointed at her hand. "That," he said. "You do that every single time. You cover it. Why do you cover it?" Her hand came down slowly. She looked at it as if it belonged to someone else. "I didn't know I did that. You do it every time you laugh, like you're catching it before it gets out." She was quiet for a moment. "My mother did it," she said finally. "She had a beautiful laugh. A big one, a real one, the kind that turns heads. And my father loved it, but my grandmother." His mother thought a woman laughing loudly was common, vulgar. She'd say it right there at the table. "Margaret, you're being common." And my mother would put her hand over her mouth and swallow the rest of the laugh. And I watched that 1,000 times growing up, and I guess She stopped. "I guess I learned it. I learned that a woman's joy is something to apologize for, to cover up, to make smaller so it doesn't offend anyone. That's a terrible thing to learn. It's a very useful thing to learn if you want to run a company full of men who are threatened by joy. But yes, in the larger sense, it's a terrible thing to learn." She looked at him. "Stop noticing my hands. It's unsettling. I like your laugh, the whole thing. The part you swallow. I'd like to hear the part you swallow sometime." The air changed. He hadn't meant it to. Or maybe some part of him had been steering toward it all night, all 3 weeks since the sidewalk. Catherine looked at him across her father's table, and the shark was gone, and the CEO was gone, and there was only a woman who had spent 40 years covering her own laughter, being told by a man she barely knew that he wanted to hear the part she'd been hiding since she was a child. "That," she said, and her voice wasn't quite steady, "is the most dangerous thing anyone has said to me in 20 years. I know. Do you understand what happens if this becomes something? Do you understand it really not as a policy you read once during onboarding, but as a real thing that would happen to 2 real people? Tell me, I lose the company." She said it flatly, laying it out like a balance sheet. "Not immediately, but the board would use it. There are 3 men on my board who have wanted me gone since the day I took the chair, and they've never had a weapon, and this would be a weapon. The CEO is having a relationship with a subordinate 11 levels down. They wouldn't even have to prove I gave you anything. The optics alone, the appearance of it, would be enough to force a review, and a review is enough to force me out, and I have spent my entire adult life building this thing, Sam. I clawed my way up through rooms where men assumed I was there to take notes. I buried my marriage in it. I buried my father's last healthy years in it, because I was in Singapore, closing a deal when he had his first heart attack, and I told myself he'd understand, and he did understand. He always understood, and that's the part I can't forgive myself for, that he understood." Her jaw was tight. "I gave up everything for that chair, and you're asking me to risk it." "Whoa, Missing för mig." "I'm not asking you to risk anything," Sam said quietly. "I'm not asking you for anything at all. I'm just telling you I'd like to hear the part of your laugh you swallow. That's the whole of it. You can walk out that door right now, and I'll never send you another email, and I'll be Sam in marketing until one of us leaves the company, and you'll have lost nothing. I'm not a threat to your chair, Catherine. I'm a guy with a 14-year-old Honda who reads a dragon book. I'm the least dangerous man you've ever met. That's exactly what makes you dangerous, she said. The men on my board I can handle. I've been handling men who want things from me my whole life. I know what to do with a man who wants my company, or my endorsement, or to sleep with the CEO so he can tell his friends. I have systems for all of that. I don't have a system for a man who wants nothing except to hear me laugh. You've walked in under all my defenses because you're not attacking anything. And that Sam, that is the most dangerous man in the world. The one who isn't trying to take anything from you. They sat in the weight of that. Owen turned a page. A group at the bar laughed at something loud and easy, and Catherine glanced at them, at the freedom of it. The way strangers could laugh without covering their mouths, without calculating the cost. And Sam watched her watch them, and understood he was looking at the loneliest person he'd ever met, and that her loneliness had a marble floor, and a driver and a photograph the size of a car door, and none of it had ever once kept her warm. I lost my father 4 months ago, she said, still looking at the strangers at the bar. I told you that the first night. What I didn't tell you is that after the funeral, I went back to work the next morning. Not the next week. The next morning. There was a product launch. I stood in a conference room in a black dress and I ran a 2-hour meeting, and nobody said a word about the fact that I'd buried my father 18 hours earlier because I'd trained them not to. I'd trained an entire organization that Catherine Vance does not have a father to bury, that she has no life outside these walls, that she is the chair and nothing else. She turned back to him. And I sat in that meeting and I thought if I died at this table right now, if I just stopped, the only people at my funeral would be people who work for me. That's what I've built. A funeral full of subordinates. And then, 9 days later, a man points at me in a bar and calls his night a disaster. And for the first time in years, I feel like a person instead of a chair. And every single thing I know about being safe is screaming at me to end it, and I can't. That's where I am, Sam. That's the whole truth of where I am. Sam didn't reach across the table. He'd learned that about her, that she distrusted easy comfort, that a hand on hers would have made her flinch. So he did the harder thing. He told her his own truth back. I read Lily the Dragon book every night now, he said. Home by 6 thanks to a policy that a certain CEO invented out of thin air. And last night in the middle of the book, she stopped me. She put her little hand on the page and she said, Daddy is the dragon sad because nobody knows he's special. And I said, yeah, baby, that's exactly it. And she thought about it and she said, that's how you looked before. 7 years old. That's how you looked before. Before what I asked her. And she said, before you started coming home. His voice caught and he let it. So don't tell me you've built a funeral full of subordinates and that's your whole life. You've already changed one thing that matters more than any deal you'll ever close. My kid has her father back. That's real. You did that, from a table in a bar. So whatever you think you are, the chair, the shark, the photograph on the wall, you're also the woman who gave a 7-year-old her dad back. And that woman is worth more than the company, Catherine. She's worth more than any of it. Catherine Vance looked at him, and her eyes were wet. And she did not cover her mouth this time. She let him see it. She let herself be seen. You should not say things like that to me, she said. I have a board meeting in the morning. Then let's not say things like that anymore tonight, Sam said. Let's talk about something stupid. Tell me the worst business decision you ever made. Make me feel better about my Honda. And she laughed the whole laugh, the swallowed part, and all out loud, uncovered the big turning heads laugh she'd inherited from a mother who'd been trained out of it. And it was so unexpected and so bright that 2 people at the next table glanced over, and for once, Catherine didn't care. And she told him about a rebranding campaign that had cost $4 million and accidentally made the client's logo look like a screaming face. And Sam laughed so hard, He had to put his ginger ale down, and for an hour, maybe two, they were just two people at a table, and the chair, and the Honda, and the board, and the ghosts all waited politely outside on the sidewalk. They started meeting every Thursday. It was never more than the table at first. Ginger ale for him, the ridiculous wine for her, 2 hours of the only honest conversation either of them had in a week. And then Owen would fold his newspaper, and Catherine would get in the dark sedan, and Sam would drive his Honda home to relieve Mrs. Delgado and check on his sleeping daughter. They told themselves it was friendship. They were adults. They were allowed friends. A CEO could have a friend. But friendship doesn't make your hands shake when you type a one-word reply. Friendship doesn't make you rehearse sentences in a parking lot. Friendship doesn't make a 40-year-old man stand in front of a photograph in a lobby every morning and think good morning to it like a fool. They both knew what it was. They just didn't have anywhere to put it, so they kept it at the table contained controlled one night a week and told themselves that as long as it lived only at the table, it wasn't the thing the policy was written to prevent. Then came the 6th. Thursday and the rain. It had been coming down all evening, and when they walked out at closing time, the sidewalk was a black mirror, and the dark sedan was idling at the curb, and Catherine stopped under the awning and didn't move toward the car. "I don't want to go home," she said. Sam stood beside her. Owen waited a discreet distance back, getting rained on too professional to comment. "There's a park," Catherine said. 2 blocks up. My father used to walk me through it after the nachos. There's a fountain. It's probably off for the night, but the walk is—" She stopped. "I don't want to go home to the ice maker, Sam. Not yet. Walk with me. Just walk." He should have said no. He knew that later replaying it, that this was the moment the line was the actual line, not the emails, and not the table. But this, a walk in the rain in a dark park with a woman he was not allowed to want. He should have said goodnight and gotten in his Honda. "Okay," he said. "Let's walk." Owen followed at a distance, and they walked, and the rain softened to a mist, and the park was empty and dark, and the fountain was off just as she'd predicted, a still black pool holding the streetlights. They talked the way they always talked, but quieter now, closer, their shoulders nearly touching under the one umbrella Owen had produced from somewhere and handed over without a word before falling back. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Catherine said. "Yeah, I don't actually want the company." She said it to the fountain, not to him. "I've never said that out loud. I've never even let myself think it in a complete sentence. But I don't want it, Sam. I wanted to prove I could have it. I wanted to walk into every room that ever underestimated me and own it. I wanted Daniel to choke on it. I wanted my father to see me run something. And I got all of that. I got every bit of it. And my father's dead, and Daniel's gone, and the rooms are all conquered. And now I'm just running a thing I never actually wanted, because I don't know who I am if I'm not running it. That's the truth I've never said. I built a life I don't want, because I was too proud to want a smaller one." Sam stopped walking. She stopped too. The mist beaded on her hair on her coat, and she looked at him under the umbrella with an expression he'd never seen on her before. Not the shark, not the CEO, not even the woman at the table. Something raw, something that had just set down a weight it had carried for 15 years and didn't know what to do with its empty hands. "What do you want?" Sam asked. "If it's not the company, if nobody was watching, if your father could see it and Daniel could choke on it and none of it mattered, what does Catherine actually want?" She looked at him for a long, long moment. "This," she said. "God help me. I want this. I want Thursdays. I want ginger ale at my dad's table. I want a man who wants to hear the part of my laugh I swallow. I want to go home to something that isn't an ice maker. I've spent my whole life wanting things I could win, and I finally want something I can only lose, and it's the first honest want I've had since I was a girl." Her voice broke. "And I can't have it. Because you work for me. Because there are 3 men on a board waiting for a weapon. Because the world I built has a rule against the only thing I actually want, and I wrote the rule. Sam, I signed it, and now it's going to keep me from the one." He kissed her. Later, both of them would understand that it hadn't been planned, that neither of them had walked into that park, intending it, that it was simply the place where all the honesty finally had nowhere left to go. Two people who had spent months handing each other the truth across a table meant for a ghost. Until there was no truth left except the one their bodies knew, and it broke the way a held breath breaks, the way a fault line breaks, sudden and total, and impossible to take back. It was raining. The fountain was off. Owen turned his back and studied the empty path with tremendous professional focus. And in a dark park, 2 blocks from a bar, where a dead man used to split nachos with his daughter, the CEO of Apex Global Marketing, and a marketing specialist 11 levels below her. On the org chart, kissed each other, like 2 people going under for the 3rd time. And neither of them was thinking about the board, or the policy, or the photograph on the wall, or the 14-word postcard, or any of the walls that had kept them both so carefully, so successfully, so unbearably alone. They were only thinking that they were for the first time in years not alone. When they finally broke apart, Catherine pressed her forehead to his, and her breath was ragged, and she said the truest and most terrible thing of the entire night. "We just ended one of our careers," she whispered. "Maybe both. You understand that. This can't come apart cleanly now. We just—" She pulled back enough to look at him. "Whatever happens now, Sam, it costs one of us everything. That's the math. There's no version of this where nobody pays." "Then let me be the one who pays," Sam said. "If it comes to it. I've got a Honda and a Dragon book and a kid who just got her dad back. I don't have a company to lose. You do. If this ever surfaces, I resign, I disappear. I'm a guy who left of his own accord and nobody ever connects us. You keep the chair." "No." "Catherine, no." She said it with the full force of the shark, the CEO, all of it aimed at him for the first time. "I have spent my entire life letting people convince me to sacrifice things for the greater good. I sacrificed my marriage for the chair. I sacrificed my father's last years for the chair. I was in Singapore, Sam. I will not let you sacrifice yourself so I can keep a thing. I just told you, I don't even want. If it comes apart, we come apart together or not at all. That's the only version I'll agree to. Promise me. Promise me you won't fall on the sword to save my chair, because I would rather lose the chair than watch you disappear the way your father did. Do you understand me? I would rather lose everything I built than teach that little girl that fathers vanish to protect something more important than her. Promise me." Rain in her hair, fountain off. Owen's back turned, a woman who had never once asked anyone for anything asking. "I promise," Sam said. He was lying, and she knew he was lying, and neither of them said so, because some promises are made, not because they'll be kept, but because the person needs to hear them. Said out loud once in the rain, before the world comes for what it's owed. Across the city, in an apartment with better furniture and colder silences, Daniel Cross set down his phone. He'd gotten a name at last. It had taken him 6 weeks, and a private investigator and a friend on the Apex board who owed him a favor and had been only too happy to hear that Catherine had made herself vulnerable, but he had it now. A name, a photograph, an employee, ID Sam Whitaker. Marketing. 11 levels down. Daniel Cross looked at the photograph of the ordinary-looking man with the tired eyes and the cheap suit, and he smiled the first real smile he'd smiled in months. She'd chosen that. After him, after all of it, she'd chosen some nobody from marketing who drove a 14-year-old car. It was almost insulting. It was in fact exactly the humiliation he needed. Because Daniel Cross had never been able to forgive Catherine for outgrowing him, and he had spent years telling anyone who'd listen that her ambition had destroyed their marriage, and here at last was the proof he'd been waiting for. That Catherine Vance was not the untouchable queen everyone thought, that she was reckless, that she was breakable, that she had handed him the one thing he'd always wanted, which was the power to end her. He picked the phone back up. He knew exactly who to call on the board. He knew exactly how to word it so it sounded like concern rather than revenge. "I only mention it because I care about the company's reputation. I only mention it because the shareholders deserve to know." And in a dark park, in the softening rain, unaware that the match had just been struck. Sam Whitaker held the loneliest, most powerful woman he had ever known. And Catherine Vance let herself be held, and for one more night, one last night, before the world found out, they were simply two people who had stopped being alone. They didn't know it was the last night. They almost never do. The email that ended the secret arrived on a Tuesday, 11 days after the rain. It didn't come to Sam. It came to the chair of the Apex Board of Directors, a silver-haired man named Gerald Pruitt, who had wanted Catherine Vance gone for 4 years and had never once had a reason he could say out loud in a boardroom. It was written with tremendous care to sound like the concern of a man who loved the company. It mentioned almost in passing that the CEO had been seen repeatedly over a period of weeks meeting privately with a junior male employee. It attached a photograph grainy taken from across a street but unmistakable of Catherine Vance and Sam Whitaker walking under a single umbrella in a park at night, their shoulders touching. It was signed by no one. It didn't need to be. Gerald Pruitt read it twice, and then he did the thing men like Gerald Pruitt have always done with a weapon that falls into their laps. He called a meeting. Catherine found out at 7:40 the next morning when her general counsel, a careful woman named Priya Raman, appeared in her office doorway without an appointment, closed the door and said, "We have a situation and I need you to tell me the truth because I can't defend you if I'm surprised." Catherine set down her coffee. She'd known this morning would come. Some part of her had known since the rain, maybe since the ginger ale, maybe since a man pointed at her in a bar, and she'd said sit down instead of leave. "Ask me," she said. Priya laid the printed email on the desk. She laid the photograph beside it. Catherine looked at it at the umbrella at Sam's shoulder against hers at the park, and she felt something she had not expected to feel, which was not fear. It was relief. "His name is Sam Whitaker," Catherine said. "He works in marketing, 11 levels below me. We have been meeting for approximately 3 months once a week in a bar. 8 days ago in a park, I kissed him. To be precise, he kissed me, but I had made it inevitable, and I take full responsibility for that. There is no other relationship in the sense you're worried about. I have given him nothing, no promotion, no raise, no advantage, no confidential information. He has asked me for nothing. But if you're asking whether it's real, Priya, whether there's something between us that the board can point to and call a conflict, yes, there is. It's completely real. Don't waste your time building a defense that it was nothing. It wasn't nothing." Priya closed her eyes for a moment. "Catherine, I know. Do you understand what Pruitt is going to do with this? I understand better than anyone in this building what Gerald Pruitt is going to do with this. He's going to call it a governance failure. He's going to say the CEO used her position to pursue a subordinate. He's going to imply coercion, that a man 11 levels down couldn't say no to the woman who signs his checks, that it's a power abuse, that it exposes the company to liability. He's going to wrap his 4-year grudge in the language of ethics, and he's going to force a review, and a review is designed to end with me gone. I wrote half the governance policies he's going to use against me. I know every word of the trap because I built the trap. I just built it for other people. Where did the photograph come from?" And here Catherine went still because she had wondered the same thing, and there was only one answer that made sense, and it made her sick. "Daniel," she said, "your ex-husband. He has a friend on the board, Marcus Bell. No, that's not he golfs with Pruitt. Daniel golfs with Pruitt. That's how it moved. Daniel found out Daniel hired someone. Daniel got the photograph, and Daniel handed it to Pruitt on the 9th hole and called it concern for the company." Her hands were very still on the desk. "This isn't governance, Priya. This is a man who has spent 4 years unable to forgive me for surviving him finally finding a way to burn down the thing I built after he left. He doesn't care about the company. He doesn't care about Sam. He wants to watch me lose. That's all this has ever been about for Daniel, watching me lose one time, just once, so the story of our marriage can finally be the one he tells where my ambition destroyed everything, instead of the true one where he couldn't stand that I flew and he didn't." Priya sat down slowly in the chair across the desk. "Then here's what I have to ask you, and I have to ask it as your lawyer and not your friend. Is there any version of this where you get ahead of it, where you end it cleanly today, deny the relationship, characterize it as mentorship, transfer him to another division and survive? Because that version exists, Catherine. It's ugly, and you'd have to lie, and you'd have to cut him loose completely, but it exists. It's the version where you keep the chair. Catherine looked in the photograph for a long time. The umbrella, the shoulders. A woman who had told a man in the rain that she'd rather lose everything than teach a little girl that fathers vanish to protect something more important than her. "No," she said. "Catherine, I said no, Priya. There's no version where I cut him loose. I made him a promise. He made me one too. He promised he'd fall on the sword to protect me. And I know he was lying when he said it, and I know he'll try to do it anyway the second he hears about this. He'll walk in here and resign and swear it was all him that he pursued me, that I'm blameless, and he'll disappear back to his Honda and his dragon book and his little girl, and he'll tell himself he saved me. And I will not let him. Do you understand? I have spent my whole life letting people sacrifice themselves for institutions. I was in Singapore when my father had his first heart attack. I am not going to stand in this office and let a good man throw himself under the wheels so that Gerald Pruitt and Daniel Cross can keep me in a chair I already told the man I don't even want. I'd rather lose it clean than keep it dirty." Priya was quiet for the moment. Then, very carefully, "You told him you don't want the chair. In the rain. 8 days ago. It's the truest thing I've said in 15 years. Then God help me," Priya said. "As your lawyer, I have to tell you to lie and save yourself. And as your friend, I have to tell you I've never respected you more. And I have to warn you that respecting you is going to cost you the company. Because Pruitt does not lose, and Daniel does not lose, and you have just told me you're going to walk into that boardroom and refuse to do the one thing that would save you." "I'm going to walk into that boardroom," Catherine said, "and tell the truth. All of it. I have never once in my career walked into a room and told the whole truth, Priya. I've managed truth. I've deployed truth. I've timed it and shaped it and released it in careful increments. Just once before they take my chair, I'd like to sit in that room and say a true thing out loud and let it cost me what it costs me. My father would have liked that. He liked people who notice things, and I've finally noticed the truest thing of all, which is that I would rather be a person than a chair." Sam found out 90 minutes later, and he found out the worst possible way, which was from human resources. A woman he'd never met named Dana called his desk phone and asked him in a voice trained to reveal nothing to come to a conference room on the 4th floor. There was a man in a suit already sitting there when Sam arrived. Legal Sam understood immediately the kind of lawyer a company sends when it's protecting itself from you. And Dana slid a folder across the table and said the words that made the floor tilt. "Mr. Whitaker, we need to discuss the nature of your relationship with Catherine Vance." Sam's first thought was not for himself. It was for her. It was they know, and if they know they're coming for her, and I promised her I wouldn't, but I lied, and now's the time I lied about. "There's no relationship," Sam said. "I don't know what you're—" "Mr. Whitaker." Dana's voice was not unkind, which was somehow worse. "There's a photograph. There have been multiple sightings. I'd strongly advise you not to start this conversation with something we both know isn't true. It won't help you, and it won't help her." And that last part, "it won't help her," was the crack Sam fell straight through. Because they'd made it about her. They'd already understood that Sam Whitaker cared more about protecting Catherine Vance than about protecting himself, and they were going to use it, and Sam knew they were going to use it. And he did the thing anyway. He did the thing he'd promised in the rain he wouldn't do. He fell on the sword. "Then let me tell you exactly what happened," Sam said, "and I want it on the record, all of it, whatever you're recording this on. I pursued her. It was me. I recognized her in a bar, and I saw an opportunity, and I inserted myself into her life. I engineered the meetings. I sent the emails. First, you can check the first email is from her, but I'd been angling for it for weeks. I set it up. She's a lonely woman who lost her father, and I took advantage of that. If you're looking for someone who abused a position of power here, you're looking at the wrong person, because the power in that bar wasn't the org chart. It was the fact that I was a healthy person who'd targeted a grieving one. This is on me. Every bit of it. She did nothing wrong except be human at the wrong moment with the wrong man. I'll resign today. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll say whatever you need me to say. Just leave her out of it. She's worth more to this company than any deal on the books, and I'm a marketing specialist with a 14-year-old car. Do the math on who's expendable. The lawyer wrote something down. Dana looked at him with an expression that might have been pity. That's a very noble speech, Mr. Whitaker, the lawyer said. Unfortunately, Ms. Vance gave a completely different account to the General Counsel 40 minutes ago, in which she took full responsibility and described you as blameless. So we have two people insisting the other one is guilty, and themselves innocent, which in my professional experience is not what guilty people do. It's what people do when they're protecting each other. And that I'm afraid is going to be very hard to spin as coercion. Sam stared at him. She what? She told the truth, the lawyer said. All of it, apparently. Including some things about a board member's ex-husband that have made this morning considerably more complicated than Mr. Pruitt anticipated. He closed his folder. You should know that whatever you two think you're doing by falling on swords for each other, you're actually building the strongest possible defense against the coercion narrative. Nobody's going to believe a man abused his power over the CEO, and nobody's going to believe the CEO coerced a man who just tried to take the entire blame himself. You've accidentally made yourselves very hard to fire for cause. Congratulations. You may have just saved each other by refusing to save yourselves. Sam left that room and did not go back to his desk. He went down 11 floors and stood in the lobby in front of the photograph the size of a car door. Catherine Vance's chin, lifted gray eyes, leveled the shark, and he pulled out his phone and typed the first thing that came. No calculation, no caution left in him at all. They pulled me into HR. I did the thing I promised I wouldn't. I tried to take the whole blame. It didn't work because you did the same thing. We're idiots. I love you. I've never said that. I'm saying it now in front of your photograph in the lobby like a lunatic, which is how this whole thing started, so it's fitting. Whatever this costs, I'm in, all of it. He watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again, and then come up, 31st floor, now. I don't care who sees. That ship has extremely sailed. K. And Sam Whitaker, who had spent 2 years never once being invited above the 11th floor, walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 31st and rode up through the company that was trying to decide whether to destroy them both, and the doors opened onto a floor he'd never seen, all glass and silence, and Catherine Vance was standing there waiting for him in front of everyone, in front of assistants and analysts and a vice president frozen mid-sentence, and she did not cover her mouth, and she did not lower her chin, and when Sam stepped off the elevator, she crossed the floor and took his face in both her hands in full view of a dozen witnesses who would tell the story for years. You broke your promise, she said. So did you. I know. We're going to have to work on that. And then quieter, just for him. I told them the truth, all of it. I told them I don't want the chair. I told them about Daniel. Pruitt's move is falling apart because it turns out you can't force out a CEO for coercion when the alleged victim keeps insisting he's the guilty one and the CEO keeps insisting she is. We've made ourselves impossible. It's the stupidest, most reckless thing I've ever done, and I feel more like myself than I have in 20 years. What happens now? Now there's a review. A real one. Independent counsel, the whole apparatus. It'll take weeks. They'll interrogate every email, every Thursday, every dollar of my compensation, and yours, looking for the thing that makes it dirty, the promotion I gave you, or the secret I told you, or the favor that turned it from 2 lonely people into an abuse of power. She held his gaze. And they won't find it, Sam, because it isn't there. We never did the thing they're looking for. The only thing we're guilty of is falling in love across an org chart, and as it turns out, there's no law against that. There's policy against it. Policy can force changes. Policy can even force one of us out of the company. But it can't make what we did into a crime because it wasn't one. The review took 5 weeks. They were the longest 5 weeks of Sam's life, and in some ways the strangest because he was not fired and he was not moved, and he was told to simply do his job. While independent lawyers he never met combed through the wreckage of his private life looking for a wound to salt. He kept picking Lily up. He kept reading the Dragon Book. He told Ellie everything finally one night at her kitchen table, and his sister listened to the whole impossible story, with her arms folded and her jaw getting tighter, and at the end of it she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "The CEO. Sam, you approached the CEO in a bar and told her your life was a disaster. I know how it sounds. It sounds like the plot of something. It sounds insane." She unfolded her arms. "But you're plugged back in. Whatever else is true, whatever this costs you, you've been a father again for 3 months. Lily drew you with a phone for a head Sam, and now she doesn't. I don't care if the woman runs the whole world. If she's the reason my niece got her dad back, then whatever happens to your career, I'm on her side." She paused. "Is she good to you?" "She covers her laugh," Sam said. "She was taught her whole life that a woman's joy is something to apologize for. And she's stopped covering it. When she's with me, she stopped covering it. That's Ellie, that's the whole thing. That's who she actually is under all of it. She's a person who was told to make herself smaller for 40 years, and she's done making herself smaller, and I got to be there for that." Ellie's eyes were wet, which she'd have denied. "Then bring her to dinner," she said. "When all this is over, I want to meet the CEO who unlearned how to hide her laugh." Daniel Cross made his last move in the 4th week, when it became clear the coercion narrative was collapsing, when the independent counsel's preliminary findings suggested no abuse of power, no material advantage exchanged. Nothing but 2 consenting adults who'd broken a fraternization policy. Daniel understood he was losing, and Daniel could not lose, and so he did the thing that men like Daniel do when the clean weapon fails. He went dirty. He leaked the photograph to a trade publication with a breathless anonymous tip about the CEO of Apex and her secret junior lover, and he sat back to watch the public humiliation do what the private review had failed to do. It was, Catherine would say later, the best thing he ever did for them, because when the story broke, it did not break the way Daniel imagined. The trade publication ran it, and for about 6 hours, it looked like a catastrophe. And then something happened that Daniel Cross, who understood grudges, but had never once understood, people could not have predicted. The story got out of the trade press and into the wider world, and the wider world did not read it as powerful woman preys on subordinate. The wider world, which had spent years watching men in chairs like Catherine's do far worse and pay nothing, read it as lonely widow finds love, and a pack of wolves tries to destroy her for it. Someone found out about the flexible hours policy, the one born in a bar, the one that had helped 400 families. Someone found out the junior employee was a single father whose daughter had drawn him with a phone for a head. Someone found out the board member driving the review golfed with the CEO's vindictive ex-husband, and the story turned. It turned hard. By the time the independent counsel released its final findings, no wrongdoing, no abuse of power, no coercion, a recommendation for structural changes and clearer policy, but no cause for termination. Catherine Vance was not the villain of the story Daniel Cross had tried to tell. She was the woman who'd lost her father and found her life, and Gerald Pruitt was the man who'd tried to weaponize a widow's loneliness, and Daniel Cross was the bitter ex who'd hired a photographer to stalk his ex-wife through a park in the rain. Pruitt resigned from the board before he could be pushed. The friend who'd passed Daniel the photograph went with him. And Daniel Cross, who had wanted more than anything to watch Catherine lose just once, got instead the exact thing he'd always feared most, which was to become a footnote in her story. The small, bitter man in the background of the part where she finally won, but that was all still to come. On the day the findings came down, Sam didn't know any of it yet. He only knew that Priya Raman called him herself and said, "It's over, no cause. You're both cleared. There will be changes you'll report through a completely separate structure. There'll be a wall between you and anything to do with her compensation or authority. It'll be airtight and public and permanent. But you keep your job. She keeps her chair, and nobody gets to call what you did a crime." A pause. For what it's worth, Mr. Whitaker, in 20 years of corporate law, I have never once watched two people try this hard to destroy themselves to save each other. It was the single most effective legal defense I've ever seen, and neither of you planned it. You just refused to let the other one fall. Courts and boards don't know what to do with that. Turns out neither did I. Sam hung up the phone and sat at his desk on the 11th floor and put his face in his hands, and a coworker asked if he was okay, and he laughed a wet, broken, relieved laugh and said, Yeah, I think I might actually be okay." That night, he drove to the bar. Their bar. The one with the little table near the back that belonged to a ghost. And Catherine was already there in her father's chair, and there was a ginger ale in front of the empty seat across from her waiting. "You ordered me a ginger ale," Sam said, sitting down. "I ordered you a ginger ale," Catherine said. "It's over, Sam. It's actually over. We survived it. Bruised, watched, permanently on record, but we survived." Pruitt. Gone by Friday. He knows it. Daniel's leak backfired so completely that the board is scrambling to distance itself from both of them. She turned her wine glass a slow quarter turn, the old gesture, but her hands were steady now in a way they hadn't been 3 months ago. It turns out the story I've spent 15 years being terrified of, powerful woman brought down by scandal, isn't the story anyone actually wanted to tell once they had the facts. The story people wanted was the true one. She looked at him. "You know what the true one is, Sam. Tell me." "A man walked into a bar after the worst 3 weeks of his life," Catherine said, and he pointed at a stranger, and he told her his night was a disaster. And it turned out she was the loneliest person in the city, sitting in her dead father's chair, and she'd forgotten how to laugh without covering her mouth. And instead of the disaster, he predicted that wrong joke gave 2 people their whole lives back. She lifted her glass. "That's the true story. That's the one that saved us. Not because it was strategic, because it was true, and true things, it turns out, are very hard to burn down." Sam lifted his ginger ale. "To the worst joke ever told in this bar," he said. "The same toast, the very first one from the first night." "To the worst joke," Catherine agreed. And then she added softly the thing she could not have said on the first night, the thing that had taken a park and a leak and 5 weeks of independent counsel to earn the right to say out loud, and to the man who told it, who turned out not to be a disaster at all. Their glasses touched with a small, clear sound. The same sound as the first night in the same bar, at the same table that belonged to a ghost who liked people who noticed things. And this time when Catherine Vance laughed, she did not cover her mouth. She let the whole thing out, the big one. The turning heads one. The one her grandmother had called common, and her mother had swallowed, and Catherine had hidden for 40 years. And it rang across the bar, bright and unashamed, and entirely her own. And a few strangers glanced over, and Catherine Vance did not care even slightly, because she was at long last exactly, and only herself, sitting in her father's chair, across from a man who had wanted nothing from her but the sound she'd just made. Outside, the city went on, indifferent and vast. Somewhere in it, Daniel Cross was learning that he had lost. Somewhere in it, a little girl was asleep with a green dragon named Pickle under her arm, waiting for a father who would be home by 6 to read her a story. And in a warm, loud bar at a small table near the back, 2 people who had every reason in the world to have walked away from each other sat close together and did not walk away. They had chosen each other, out loud, in public, against a board, an ex-husband, a policy, and every wall they'd each spent a lifetime building. And the walls, it turned out, had not fallen on them after all. They had simply finally come down. The first time Catherine Vance met Lily Whitaker, she was more nervous than she had been walking into any boardroom in her life. It was a Sunday, 6 weeks after the review closed, and Sam had asked her over for pancakes. Not dinner, he'd been specific about that. Dinner is a big thing. Dinner has pressure. But pancakes on a Sunday is just what we do, and I want you to see what we do. And Catherine, who had negotiated 9-figure deals without her pulse rising, sat in the dark sedan outside Sam's apartment building for 4 full minutes before she could make herself go in. "You can do this," she told herself out loud. "You've fired 200 people by video call. You can eat a pancake with a 7-year-old. But that was exactly the problem, and she knew it. She could fire 200 people. She had no idea how to be loved by one small girl who drew the truth on paper without knowing it was the truth. Sam opened the door before she knocked. He must have been watching for her. Behind him, from somewhere in the apartment, a voice called out, "Is that her? Is that the lady, Daddy? Is that the lady?" "That's the lady," Sam called back. He looked at Catherine and grinned. "No pressure. You're a terrible man. You keep saying that. You keep coming back." And then Lily was there, skidding into the entryway in socks. A green dragon clutched under one arm, and she stopped dead and stared up at Catherine with the frank, merciless assessment that only children and CEOs are capable of. Catherine, who had been assessed by hostile boards and skeptical investors, and rooms full of men waiting for her to fail, found that none of it had prepared her for the judgment of a 7-year-old in mismatched socks. "You're the lady from the bar," Lily announced. "Lily," Sam started. "It's fine," Catherine said. She crouched down slowly so that she was at the child's eye level, a thing she had not done for anyone in years. Lower herself, make herself smaller, and she noticed with some astonishment that it didn't feel like shrinking this time. It felt like meeting someone. "Yes, I'm the lady from the bar. My name is Catherine." "Daddy says you're his boss." "I was, sort of. It's complicated. Mostly now I'm just his friend." She glanced up at Sam. "Is that right? Is friend the word we're using?" "For today," Sam said. "Pancakes level word." Lily considered this with tremendous seriousness. Then she held up the dragon. "This is Pickle. He can't breathe fire. But that's okay because the fire isn't the important part." And Catherine Vance, who had built an empire on knowing exactly what to say in every room, found that her throat had closed and she could not say anything at all. Because she knew this dragon. She knew this dragon better than the child holding him could possibly understand. Sam had told her about Pickle at the very first table on the very first night before either of them knew what they were starting. She knew that the little dragon's smoke saved the village. She knew that Sam had read this book 400 times, and then stopped, and then started again, because a woman he'd met by accident had asked him what he was going to do about a daughter who drew him with a phone for a head. "No," Catherine managed finally. "The fire isn't the important part. The smoke is." She reached out and very gently touched the dragon's felt head. "The smoke is what saves everyone. I know this story, Lily. Your dad told it to me a long time ago, before I ever met you. He did all the voices." Lily's whole face transformed. "He does the best voices. Does he do the mean dragon for you, the one who laughs at Pickle? He does the mean dragon. Do it, Daddy. Do the mean dragon." And Sam, standing in the doorway of his small apartment, with the two people who had become against every possible odd. The whole of his life did the mean dragon's voice right there in the entryway, and Lily shrieked with laughter, and Catherine Vance laughed too. The whole laugh. The uncovered one. And Lily stopped laughing for a second to look at her. This elegant stranger sitting on her father's entryway floor, laughing like a regular person, and something in the child's face settled. Some question got answered, and she grabbed Catherine's hand with the total unearned trust of a 7-year-old and said, "Come see my room. I have more dragons. I have 6. 6 dragons," Catherine said, letting herself be pulled to her feet by a small, determined hand. "That's a serious collection. It's the best collection." And that was it. That was the whole audition, the one Catherine had sat in the car for 4 minutes dreading. It had lasted 90 seconds, and she had passed it by knowing the name of a dragon. They ate pancakes. Lily talked the entire time, narrating her dragons, her school, her opinion that ketchup belonged on eggs. It does not. Sam said, and Lily said, it does. And Catherine asked to arbitrate, said with the full gravity of her office, "I'm going to abstain. This dispute predates me, and I don't have jurisdiction." And Sam laughed so hard he choked on his coffee. and Catherine Vance sat in a cramped kitchen at a table that a carpenter grandfather had not built, but might as well have eating pancakes cut into pieces by a man who read dragon books, watching a 7-year-old wear a syrup mustache, and she thought this. This is the thing I said I wanted in the rain. This is the ice maker's opposite. This is what a life is supposed to sound like. Later, after Lily had been put down for a nap that she loudly protested and then surrendered to, within 4 minutes, Sam and Catherine stood in the kitchen doing the dishes, and Catherine said, "I have to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you argue." That's an ominous opener. I'm stepping back from the company. Sam set down the plate he was drying. Catherine, you said you'd let me finish. She kept washing, not looking at him, which was how she'd learned to say hard things. Not because of the scandal. Not because they forced me, they didn't. The review cleared me. I could stay in that chair for another 10 years, and no one could stop me. That's exactly the problem. I could stay for 10 more years. And in the rain 3 months ago, I told you the truest thing I'd ever said, which was that I don't want it. I never wanted it. I wanted to prove I could have it, and I proved it, and my father saw me run something before he died, and Daniel choked on it exactly like I dreamed he would, and every room that ever underestimated me got conquered. I won all of it. And it's ash, Sam. It's completely ash. I go up to the 31st floor, and I run the most successful agency in the country, and I feel nothing at all, and then I come here and eat a pancake with your daughter, and I feel like a human being for the first time in 20 years. She turned off the water. So I'm going to do it in stages carefully, over about a year. You don't just walk out of a chair like mine. There's succession, there's the board, there's shareholders. But I've started it. I've named the person who's going to replace me. And when it's done, I'm going to do something I haven't done since I was 22 years old, which is figure out what I actually want to do with a day. Bambi sinhandi simwae. Sam was quiet for a moment. You're sure? I have never been more sure of anything. And before you say it, no, this isn't about you. Or it's not only about you. I don't want you carrying that. I'm not giving up the company for a man. I gave up my whole life for a company. I'm just finally taking some of it back, and you happen to be standing here while I do it. She looked at him. Though I won't pretend you had nothing to do with me remembering that I was a person. You did. You pointed at me in a bar and reminded me. But the choice is mine. I need it to be mine. Do you understand the difference? I understand the difference, Sam said. You spent your whole life having people tell you to sacrifice yourself for the institution. This time you're choosing yourself, and nobody gets to say a man talked you into it. Nobody gets to say a man talked me into it. She dried her hands. Not Daniel, not Pruitt, not the version of me that spent 40 years believing my worth was the chair. I'm choosing myself, Sam, out loud, for the first time. A pause. You should touch the tools. He blinked. What? Your grandfather's tools. The chest in the closet. You opened the door months ago, and you still haven't sat down at it. If I can give up the largest agency in the country, you can make a dovetail joint. Stop being afraid of being bad at the thing you love. That's the whole lesson, isn't it? That's the thing we taught each other at that table. The tools in your closet and the chair I'm giving up, same closed door. You said it yourself the first night. So open it, all the way. I want to see you make something with your hands. And Sam did. That very afternoon, while Lily napped and Catherine sat cross-legged on the floor of the closet, handing him tools she couldn't name. Sam Whitaker opened his grandfather's chest for the first time in 11 years. The hand planes were there. The chisels older than his mother. He picked up a chisel, and his hand remembered, not perfectly, not the way it used to, but it remembered the weight and the balance of it, the muscle memory of a boy who'd once made a joint you couldn't slide paper through. His eyes stung. Catherine watched him and said nothing, because she'd learned from him that the best comfort is often just being witnessed. I'm going to build Lily a bookshelf, Sam said, turning the chisel in the light. For the dragon books. My grandfather built the crib I slept in. I'm going to build my daughter a place to keep her stories. Then let's go buy wood. Catherine said, standing, brushing off her very expensive slacks like a person who fully intended to spend her Sunday at a lumberyard. I've closed acquisitions worth $500 million, and I have never once bought a plank of wood. Teach me. I want to learn a thing that makes something real. They bought wood that afternoon, the CEO of Apex Global Marketing and the marketing specialist 11 levels down at a lumberyard on the edge of the city. And Catherine got sawdust on her cashmere and did not care. And Sam taught her the difference between oak and pine. And Lily rode in the cart and named every board like it was a pet. The bookshelf took 3 weekends. 3. It was not perfect. The first dovetail was a disaster, and Sam threw it across the garage he'd rented month to month, and Catherine, who had never failed at anything she'd set her mind to, and was therefore extraordinarily bad at failing, snapped a chisel trying to force a cut, and swore in a way that would have scandalized her board. But they kept at it, and Lily supervised, and by the 3rd weekend, there was a small oak bookshelf, slightly imperfect, entirely real, built by the hands of a man who'd almost forgotten he had them, and a woman who was learning for the first time in her life that not everything worth having could be won. They put it in Lily's room. They filled it with dragon books, and Lily stood in front of it and ran her small hand along the wood her father had shaped and said, "Did you make this? Really make it with the tools?" And Sam said, "Really made it." And Lily looked at him with an expression of such total wonder that Sam had to leave the room for a minute, and Catherine followed him and found him in the hallway with his back against the wall and his hand over his eyes. "She looked at me like I could do anything," Sam said. "She used to draw me with a phone for a head, and just now she looked at me like her dad can build a bookshelf out of nothing, like I hung the moon. I almost missed this, Catherine. I almost missed my whole life. I was going to disappear the way my father did, just slower, just quieter, and she was going to grow up filing me under busy. And I almost—" "But you didn't," Catherine said. "You told a bad joke in a bar instead, and here you are in a hallway crying because your daughter thinks you hung the moon. That's not a man who disappeared, Sam. That's a man who came all the way home." The story of Sam and Catherine did not stay a secret because they decided together that it would never be a secret again. They had spent months hiding at a table meant for a ghost, and hiding had nearly cost them everything, and they were done with it. When Catherine's succession was announced, and she stepped down from the chair a year later, on her own terms at the peak, handing the company to a woman she'd chosen and mentored, the story of how she'd found her way back to her own life came with it, and this time, nobody tried to make it dirty, because there was nothing dirty left in it. It was just true. A widow who'd forgotten how to laugh, a father who'd almost vanished, a wrong joke at the right table, 2 people who'd refused to let each other fall. Ellie got her dinner. Catherine came and met the sister who'd shoved Sam out the door toward a nurse named Diane and accidentally sent him toward the rest of his life. And Ellie, who had promised to be on Catherine's side. If she was the reason Lily got her dad back. Took one look at the way Catherine laughed without covering her mouth and folded the woman into a hug before either of them had said 10 words. "You unlearned it," Ellie said into her ear. "The hiding. Sam told me. You unlearned how to hide your laugh." And Catherine, who had walked into more intimidating rooms than she could count, found herself undone by a hug from a marketing specialist's older sister in a small kitchen that smelled like pot roast. They married 2 years after the joke. It was small. Catherine Vance, who could have filled a ballroom with the most powerful people in the country, wanted 40 folding chairs in a park. The park, the one with the fountain, the one where a dead man had walked his daughter after nachos, the one where Sam had kissed her in the rain and told her he'd fall on the sword and lied. The fountain was on this time. Lily was the flower girl and took the job with the deadly seriousness of a general and carried Pickle down the aisle because he wanted to see, and nobody argued with her, least of all the bride. Catherine's father was not there to walk her down the aisle, and she'd thought that would break her, and in a way it did. But Sam had thought of something. He'd gone back to the bar, their bar, and asked the owner, an old man who remembered a regular who'd split terrible nachos with his little girl decades ago, and the owner had gone into a back room and come out with a photograph faded of a man and a girl at a small table near the back, both of them mid-laugh, the girl's hand not yet trained to cover her mouth. Sam had it framed. He gave it to Catherine the morning of the wedding, and Catherine looked at the photograph of herself at 6 years old, laughing without shame, sitting with the father who'd taught her that a chair where somebody used to be is better than nothing at all, and she wept. And then she carried the photograph down the aisle instead of a bouquet so that her father could see her run something after all. Not a company this time. A life. At the reception in the same park, Sam stood to give a toast, and he lifted a ginger ale, because of course he did. "Most of you know how we met," he said, and 40 people laughed, because by now most of them did. "I walked into a bar after the worst 3 weeks of my life. My marriage had ended. My daughter was drawing me with a phone for a head. I'd forgotten I had hands that could build things. I was disappearing one late night at a time, and I didn't even know it. And my sister shoved me out the door toward a blind date with a nurse named Diane." He raised his glass toward Ellie, who was already crying. "Diane, wherever you are tonight, thank you for canceling. You have no idea what you set in motion." More laughter. Catherine in the front row was not covering her mouth. "I pointed at a stranger in that bar," Sam went on, "and I told her my night was a disaster. I thought it was the worst thing I'd ever done. I thought I'd embarrassed myself in front of the most powerful woman in the city, and that Monday I'd have to hand in my resignation." He looked at Catherine. Instead, she said, "Sit down." 2 words, and I sat down. And a woman who'd been taught her whole life to make herself smaller, to swallow her own laugh, to be a chair, instead of a person she sat across from, a nobody from marketing, and she let herself be seen. And I let myself be seen. And it turned out that the 2 loneliest people in the city had walked into the same bar with the exact same idea to have one drink somewhere nobody knew them. We were both trying to disappear, and instead, we found each other. He had to stop for a second. Lily in the front row called out, "Keep going, Daddy!" And everyone laughed, and it gave him the second he needed. "People told us it was impossible," Sam said. "They told us it was the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong 2 people. A CEO and an employee. It broke every rule. There was a board and an ex-husband and a policy she'd written herself and every wall you could build, and most of them we'd built ourselves. Everything said, walk away. Everything said it couldn't work. It would cost too much. It wasn't worth the risk." He lifted his glass higher. "But here's what I learned at a table in a bar from a woman who taught me more in 3 months than I'd learned in 40 years. Love isn't about perfect timing. It never is. If we'd waited for the right time, the right place, the right 2 people who didn't break any rules, we'd have waited forever, and I'd still be disappearing, and she'd still be alone in an apartment with nothing but an ice maker for company. Love isn't the thing that happens when everything lines up. Love is choosing each other when everything says to walk away. That's the whole of it. That's the only lesson I've got. You choose each other. Out loud, in the rain, in front of the board, in front of everyone. Even when it cost you. Especially when it cost you." He looked at Catherine, and Catherine looked back at him, and 40 folding chairs full of people held their breath. "I chose you," Sam said the moment you said, "Sit down." "I've been choosing you every day since, and I'm going to choose you every day for the rest of my life." To Catherine, who was never a disaster, who was only ever the best thing that ever walked into that bar. And Catherine Vance stood up in a park in front of everyone holding a photograph of a laughing little girl and her father. And she crossed to the man who had pointed at her on the worst night of both their lives, and she took his face in both her hands, the way she had on the 31st floor in front of a dozen witnesses, and she kissed him, and she did not care who was watching, because she had spent 40 years caring who was watching, and she was done. She was finally gloriously done. And then she laughed, the whole laugh. The big one, the turning heads one, the one her grandmother had called common, and her mother had swallowed, and Catherine had hidden for 4 decades, until a tired man in a cheap suit told her he wanted to hear the part she swallowed. She let all of it out, uncovered, unashamed, ringing across the park where her father had once walked her after nachos, and it was the freest sound Sam Whitaker had ever heard. And their daughter, because that was what Lily was now theirs, clapped her hands and shouted, "Again!" And Catherine laughed again harder, and did not cover her mouth, and would never cover her mouth again for as long as she lived. They built a life. Not a perfect one. There is no such thing, and they'd both spent too long chasing perfect to want it anymore. Catherine left the company, and did not, as she'd feared, dissolve into nothing without a chair to define her. She started small. She taught eventually a seminar for young women climbing toward rooms that would try to make them smaller, and she taught them, among other things, never to cover their laughs. Sam kept his job in marketing, and rose in it over the years. Promotion by promotion, every one of them earned in a structure walled off completely from Catherine, every one of them, his and his alone, so that no one could ever say he'd been carried. He built things on the weekends. Bookshelves first, and then a table, and then one long summer a crib, because Lily at 10 got a baby sister, and Sam Whitaker built his second daughter's crib with his grandfather's tools the way his grandfather had built his, closing a circle that a 14-word postcard from Arizona had once broken. Daniel Cross tried once, years later, to insert himself back into the story, a bitter message, an attempt to reopen an old wound. Catherine read it and felt nothing, which was how she knew she'd finally won the thing she'd spent so long fighting for. She didn't reply. She showed it to Sam, and Sam said, "Do you want me to do anything?" And Catherine said, "No, he's a footnote. He was always going to be a footnote. Let him stay one." And she deleted it, and they went to read the girls a story, and that was the last Daniel Cross ever occupied a single second of Catherine Vance's life. The dragon book got read to a second daughter. The mean dragon's voice got performed a few hundred more times. And every so often on a quiet Thursday, Sam and Catherine would leave the girls with Ellie and go back to their bar, and sit at the little table near the back, the one that had belonged to a ghost, and now, in a way, belonged to them too. He'd order a ginger ale. She'd order the ridiculous wine her father would have mocked. And they'd talk the way they'd always talked, honestly, across a table, two people who had found in each other the one person they could tell the whole truth to. "Do you ever think about it?" Catherine asked him once, years in at that table. "What would have happened if you'd gone to the right table, if you'd found the real blind date, if Diane hadn't canceled?" Sam turned his ginger ale in his hand, the old gesture, the one he'd learned from her. "Every day," he said, "I think about the man I was going to become. The one who disappeared slow. The one whose daughter drew him with a phone for a head, and eventually just stopped drawing him at all. He was so close, Catherine. He was one right table away." He looked at her across the little table near the back, at the woman who no longer covered her laugh, who had walked away from an empire to eat pancakes on Sundays, who had chosen him in the rain, when everything said to walk away. "I told a bad joke to the wrong woman at the wrong table, on the worst night of my life. And it was the single best thing I ever did. It saved my life. It saved hers. It gave two little girls a mother and a father who actually show up." "To the worst joke," Catherine said, lifting her glass. "The same toast. Always the same toast." "To the worst joke," Sam agreed. "That turned out to be the truest thing either of us ever said." Their glasses touched that same small, clear sound in that same warm, loud bar at that same table, meant for a ghost who'd liked people who noticed things. And Catherine Vance laughed the whole laugh out loud, unafraid, and this time, and every time after, and for all the rest of the days of her one chosen life, she never once covered her mouth. Because here is the truth that a wrong joke at the wrong table taught two of the loneliest people in the city, and it is the only truth that ever mattered. Love is not about perfect timing, and it is not about the right place, and it is not about two people who break no rules and take no risks and keep themselves safely, carefully, unbearably alone. Love is about choosing each other when every single thing in the world says to walk away, and then choosing each other again the next day, and the next out loud in the rain in front of everyone for the rest of your lives. Sam Whitaker chose Catherine Vance. Catherine Vance chose Sam Whitaker. And two people who were each one wrong table away from disappearing forever, built instead a life so full and so real and so entirely their own that the walls they'd spent their whole lives building never got the chance to fall on them, because in the end they simply chose to tear them down.